Good to see you.
Good to see you guys. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So today we're going to walk through a case study that we found a lot of interest in, something that Nick's been working on the last couple of years. So we're going to walk through kind of the outcome, what we were trying to achieve with the project,
Sure.
the challenges along the way, which I thought were fascinating, both across technology and non-technology, and the end result, where you guys are at now. So just a little history. Nick is one of our top clients, but actually he used to work at RKON too, and he was one of our top Citrix senior consultants for several years and took a pretty high-level position with MED3000 recently. So why don't you tell us about your background with
Sure.
Med, what you do for them,
Sure.
and then what they do, and we'll dig into it.
Thanks, Mark. I'm Nick Miller. I'm a director in our technical operations team at MED3000. I have three teams: application delivery, which is probably what we're going to talk about today, back office operations, and I'm in charge of the field support team across all of our offices.
And can dig into a little bit, what does MED3000 do?
Sure.
What's their business? And
As you can probably tell from the title of our company, we're in healthcare. We actually provide healthcare services to healthcare providers, so hospital systems, medical practices. We do billing operations, revenue cycle management, but we also have a application presentation side. So we have hospitals and medical groups that pay us to host their EHR, their practice management software. We actually have our own EHR and PM product that we develop and that we sell. So, yeah.
an interesting bit of history, the impact this event's had on our company and our clients. We actually met MED3000 at this event 8 or 9 years ago, originally, and then now there's been a couple people from Med that work for us and
Yep.
a couple people for us that work for Med. So those are all really good things because they all help us understand from each other's perspective on how to help each other. So why don't we kick in and talk about the project? What was the goal of the project? How did you get it approved? And then let's dig into,
Sure.
if you want to start on what a success it was first before we go into challenges, it's up to you.
So, as probably all of us have heard in technology for the last few years, this whole concept of a virtualized desktop, right? Everybody talked about how that's going to solve all these problems, and everybody should be moving to virtual desktop, and we need to look at it. So, my boss and his boss said, "Hey, we need to do this. We don't know what this is, but everybody's talking about it, and we need to do it." And we specifically, it came at a point where we were experiencing some pretty significant challenges with our environment. We have 18 offices across the country. Of course, we're running Windows PCs at all those locations, and managing those PCs was becoming ever increasingly more difficult. So we had a couple options at that point, right? We could hire a lot more IT guys and sit them at all of those offices so that they could help maintain all of those PCs. But that was cost prohibitive and really wasn't kind of going to solve some of the other fundamental problems with that type of scenario, because we were having problems with how do we maintain patching, how do we keep AV up to date on these, how do we prevent those PCs from saturating our WAN circuits when we are patching and when we are running AV, how do we force standardization, how do we push applications to all of those locations, and all of that. As MED3000 grew, the scale became overwhelming for the traditional PC deployment method, right? So we looked at virtual desktop and we said, well, we may be able to solve all of these things by putting a single virtual desktop infrastructure in place that everyone connects to our data center to get to, right? And because we are a hosting company for medical practices, that's kind of where we get into, right? We already had a Citrix application delivery team, right? We had Citrix servers, we had a relationship with Citrix, we had some engineers that were pretty knowledgeable in that infrastructure. So when we started talking about it, we said, well, this really won't be that difficult, right? We can do this. We've already been doing this at an application level for years and years and years. So let's just make it happen, right? It's not going to cost us that much because we're going to be able to leverage our existing infrastructure. We don't need to hire new people. We're good. So that was the beginning.
Didn't you listen to anything we taught you
Yeah.
at RKON?
Exactly.
So why don't you dig in, let's talk about, maybe some of the challenges that you hit along the way, or if you want to jump to the end result, but let's lead into that. It was a very positive end result and a great case study for a lot of different things, actually. But let's walk through, kind of the purpose of this today is for everybody that's thinking about doing this or along the path, we want to make sure that you understand what talented folks like Nick have gone through and the challenges that, nobody was better trained than Nick, and challenges that everybody goes through with these projects, right? And that this is supposed to be a learning environment where, we're sharing information from a peer level.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
why don't you go through what went well and what were the surprises, and you can hit
Sure.
people, technology, budget, any order you want.
Everything.
Just, why don't we, if you want to start
Yeah.
with,
So when we started looking at this project and what it's going to take to replace the traditional PC model and do a hosted PC per user type scenario, of course, what does everybody look at? Well, what is the cost, right? And we said, well, we're spending $1,500 per desktop by the time we factor licensing, and that's not including our actual cost of ownership. A Citrix license is going to cost us this, and we've already got ESX, so we've got a pretty good idea what our user density is going to be at that level. So we started down a projection, and Jeff had asked me, and I tried to look for my original projections of cost, and what our use case was going to look like, which was completely wrong. But so that was really kind of our initial problem. Again, we were at the, hey, we can do this. This isn't going to be a big deal. This isn't going to cost us a lot of money.
we can solve all problems, and we can do it for a lot less money.
That's right.
And somebody said, I'll
and
buy.
real quick. It's not going to take us any
We're going
time.
to get this done in 6 weeks.
Yeah. So we, I think part of the original, one of the big things that we ran into with a virtualized desktop environment, and I wish somebody would have talked to me 2 years ago when we originally talked about this, was we had already gone through data center consolidations, which I'm sure you guys all have, right? Everybody has virtualized infrastructure, whether it's ESX, hypervisor, Zen server. So we had already gone through this scenario where we'd taken all of our servers and converted them to virtual machines. We already had that infrastructure, and we had a team, right? We've got a team that specializes in virtualization and storage behind that. So that's not a team that reports to me. So of course I talk to that director and say, hey, this is what we're looking at doing, and we all get together and start planning this out. And all those engineers, of course, say, no problem. We've done this before, right? What's the difference between a server and Windows XP or Windows 7?
Parts are parts.
Parts are parts. Right, we know how to do this. So we looked at what they were doing at a server side and the amount of servers they could get into virtual servers onto their physical platform, and we said, wow, we're going to save a lot of money, right? Because we can pack all kinds of desktops onto these physical servers.
How many were you thinking out of the gate?
So when we talked about this originally, I thought, looking at what our use case was with servers, and again, this was totally my ignorance, I said, well, we could probably get 450 people on a physical server.
About 500.
About 500, right? Which is kind of humorous because Citrix has been saying you can get 500 users for a physical server for the last decade.
And we believe
right?
all the marketing.
Exactly, right. Which I should have
That's,
known then.
Citrix, great partner.
Yeah. we love Citrix. Which should have been an indication for me at that time that I was clearly drinking the Kool-Aid, and that wasn't a reality.
We did teach you well.
Yeah. So that was part of our initial challenges. At that point, we had not virtualized even our presentation servers, right? Our XenApp servers. So we were just kind of going down that path, and we said, well, shoot, we're going to get 450 users, concurrent users on these boxes. We're only going to need, our goal initially was maybe 1,000 users. Well, we only got to buy 2, maybe 3 servers, so we're in +1.
Tops.
Right? We're good.
We'll throw an extra one in just in case.
Yeah. So we started to pilot that. We started to bring some of our users into the virtual desktop, and it was apparent very quickly that scalability was not going to happen, right? I mean, we were looking at then of course we have to start digging into performance issues, right? Well, where the servers guys didn't care about CPU affinity and memory affinity, and they just looked at the overall CPU utilization of a physical server and the memory utilization. We started to see, well, we really do need to worry about those things.
So they didn't look at memory.
Well, they looked at memory, but it was more of you can over allocate.
Okay.
Right? With servers.
Not understanding was the opposite. That
Exactly.
memory actually is
exactly.
the key. Yeah.
So we ran into some initial problems with that, which of course impacted our budget, right? Because now we're talking about physical hardware that we need to purchase. And of course, anybody that knows ESX, every socket that you have, you got a license, right? And every physical server, we were buying Microsoft Data Center licensing so that we could put unlimited server VMs on that. So now that meant every single physical server that we had to buy exponentially increased our budget, right? Of course, I'm sure you guys work for organizations that just have piles of money, and that's not a problem. But for us, budgeting is an annual process. So we were into this project, and it became very apparent that we needed more money to make it happen. But we were 6 months before we were even talking about what the next budget year was going to look like, so we could get the additional hardware for the project, right?
Were you all in a room trying to figure out who's going to have this conversation
exactly.
upstream?
Exactly, right. So 2 years ago, when we started that process, we maybe got one site converted over, which maybe was our smaller office. It was maybe 50 people, right? Yep. And we had anticipated that we were going to just roll through all of our sites and get everybody with a virtual desktop. We were basically at a hard stop, right? We can't convert any more people because we don't have the hardware and the capacity to do it. We can't get more hardware because we don't have the money.
And nobody's got the guts to escalate.
And nobody's got right.
Which is a real thing
Right.
we've all dealt with.
Right.
Getting a surprise, and takes about a month to 6 weeks for somebody to get the guts up to explain it to somebody. So
Right.
after they've
Right.
got their resume ready and they're
Right. So it affected obviously our timeline as well, right? So, yeah.
So why don't you dig into some of the other technology challenges that
Sure.
that you ran into and what you guys did about
Yeah, so once we kind of resolved the whole cost, budget dollars, buy more hardware, more servers, we started getting to the point where we had probably 200 users on virtual desktop, a couple more sites. Things were going okay, but we kind of ran into some more performance issues, right? And of course, what do you pull from? You pull from your experience. And you say, well, clearly we need more ESX servers, right? So we purchased a few more, and it was getting to the point where we're putting more hardware in as far as servers, but we're not seeing better performance, right? Login times are taking a long time. Users are complaining about, just navigating applications inside of virtual desktop. Reboot times are taking a long time on our reboot cycles. So now we've got a whole other set of issues, and we don't know what to look at, right? And we pulled our guys that are responsible for virtualization together, and of course, what do they say? It's not our problem, right? Here,
Must be the application.
Yeah, it must be the application. Here's the graph that shows CPU utilization at an ESX level. You guys aren't using that, it's not a problem, right? No issue.
Everybody's metrics look good except for the end user.
Exactly. So, we really struggled to try to find out where our performance problems were at that point, because anybody that's kind of gone down this path, what they don't tell you right at the beginning, what the sales guys don't tell you about how great this is going to be, you're introducing a ton of complexity into your environment.
I don't think they knew, 2-3 years ago when all this started,
Right.
a lot of that complexity was be honest with you, a little bit unknown because most of, at that time, if you think back, there was a lot of proof of concepts and a lot of environments up to 200 users, but nobody had really expanded that, and they had all stalled out a little. So the biggest part of the complexity was a little bit unknown at that time.
Yep. So we were now we're talking about shared storage. We're talking about shared networks. We're talking about virtualized servers, hypervisors, all things that now you've got to look at to try to determine where your bottleneck is.
Where's the root cause?
Right.
And it's not like there's some tool out there that can magically point to all this and aim at it.
Exactly. Every vendor has their own tools. Right. Every vendor tells you that it's not their problem.
All those tools are set up to point elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Just the nature of the game, right?
Right.
Yeah. Coming to root cause absolutely is the time involved with that researching, chasing, is enormous.
Yep. So we basically got to a point where we didn't know where to go, and we didn't know what was really causing our problem. We had called different vendors in, and like I said, they basically all said that their stuff was fine. And we, of course, I've got a relationship with RKON. MED3000 has a relationship with RKON. They knew what we were doing, and so we were able to kind of call.
Is that when you pulled us in?
Yeah, we pulled you guys in and said, listen, here's what's going on. Everything that we're reading says that we should be able to do this, but we're not. What's going on?
Yeah.
Right. And we pulled our team together and their team together. We did some whiteboarding. We talked about what was going on.
Was that Cameron that came out? Okay.
Yep. So, and a few more people. But it was within probably a couple hours. I mean, this isn't like we spent a week talking about this, right? And I said, we think you got a problem with storage, right? And I had suspected that, but of course our SAN team, we had a NetApp SAN, it was fairly new, right? And they were telling us, not a problem, right? They were showing me all kinds of graphs that our read-write times are fine, right?
Another great product, by the way.
Yeah. So we started talking. We talked to NetApp. Said, listen, here's our problem. Some people are telling us that this might be a problem. What can you do? Of course, they told us our storage is optimized for virtualization because everybody was, right? It'll be fine. And of course, we weren't finding the solution that we needed from them. So we went to Dell because Dell was another big vendor that we use. And probably you guys are in the same mindset where we don't want to pull in other vendors that we don't have to, right? We've got a few key vendors that we need to use inside of our infrastructure and our environment. I don't want a bunch of different vendors that I got to call and try to track things down, right? So we talked to Dell. We asked them for their recommendations. Of course, they gave us some scenario of whatever, but their storage solution was really pretty weak. So we ended up, and from our conversation, RKON had said, hey, you guys need to check out Whiptail, right?
Okay, right.
And I think they're here. I didn't know they were going to be here. We're not. This wasn't some conspiracy, but we'd never heard of Whiptail, right? We're EMC, Dell, ESX. Our VMware. The big vendors. Again, we don't want some little startup. We don't want to be the first guys to use new technology.
Well, you realize we went through the exact thing you were going through maybe a year or two ago. So we didn't. We hit the same ceiling of, hey, this thing's working great. We get to 200 users and nobody knows what's going on. That's when we searched out and found Whiptail for our own internal cloud solution because we had run into the exact same issue. So
so we ended up, started reading up on Whiptail. It's a flash-based storage appliance, which sounds pretty impressive, right from the start and intriguing. And what was amazing is, of course, we went back to NetApp and we went back to Dell and said, listen, these guys have flash-based storage, and they're telling us that they're going to get 250,000 IOPS.
And IOPS was the key thing. Yep.
Right? On their appliance. And what we were getting out of our NetApp, traditional spindles, was like 2,000, 3,000 IOPS.
And so you're adding giant storage just to get a couple extra IOPS, and reality was just wasted empty
and what
storage.
NetApp was telling us to do is buy more spindles.
Right.
You need more heads to read your data, right? But
You
now
just
you're
need eggs, but you had to buy the whole cake.
right.
Yep.
Right. So that really wasn't scalable for what we wanted to do. Dell kind of had this hybrid thing where they said, well, we'll go right to flash-based storage and then we'll offload it to disk. But they weren't able to really perform at the same level either.
And did that fix it? We did a POC?
Yeah, we
on
did.
that?
So we did a
Yep.
proof of concept. It's literally a 2U box,
Yeah.
right? And we're using it for a very specific purpose, and that is the write cache on our virtual desktops, right? It's not storing any critical data. It's basically temporary data for our users as they read write when they're on virtual desktop. So I didn't need anything fancy to replicate data. I didn't need a bunch of storage space. I just needed fast speed. I told our team it's like basically equivalent of this is our Indy car, right? It's not street legal. It doesn't have cars. It doesn't have lights. It doesn't have a seatbelt, right? But it's fast, right? That's what we need. Right. And we put it in. And it was basically as soon as we started powering on our VMs, right? We knew right away that was indeed the problem, and Whiptail was the solution.
I remember we went through that internally, and we were equally shocked that something actually worked better than they even advertised.
Yep.
So,
Yep. So, that was probably a year ago at this point,
Yep.
maybe a little bit longer than that. We ended up purchasing the Whiptail for our virtual desktop implementation. We just recently expanded that storage as we've continued to move on, so it's scaled for us as we had hoped and predicted that it would for us. But that was definitely a major hurdle. We've had multiple hurdles, right? But that storage piece was something that we banged our head on for a long time, and we didn't even know about Whiptail, right? And sometimes you need to have somebody come in from the outside and say, "Oh, have you looked at this?" Right? And it was a great recommendation.
That's awesome. So let's go through what were the other technology highlights, things that worked really well, and let's kind of do a recap on what did you achieve on this project.
Sure. I mean, it's been a learning curve for us, and I told Jeff, I said, I wish 2 years ago would have had somebody to talk to that had gone through this journey, because I think it would have shortened our time of implementation. And
you might not have lost your hair.
And I might have lost my hair. That's true. So when we started down that path, we were, like I said, we were hosting applications with Citrix XenApp. My application delivery team is 3 people, and we had probably 2,000, 3,000 concurrent users at any one time. So scaling up and turning our environment to host internal virtual desktop users, we were concerned about resources to maintain it, right? Headcount. So
because you're taking the burden of the field,
right,
and bringing it in house.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Under you.
Right. Right. So there were some key technologies that really allowed us to be a lot more efficient in the way that we manage that environment, and it's just kind of part of a virtual desktop environment. But going to virtualized Citrix servers, right? Using
which is something we wouldn't have done 5 years ago, 6 years.
We
wouldn't even. In fact, we were against it. We
Right.
don't do that. That's
Right.
absolutely against. Never do
Yeah.
that. And now we say always do it. Right.
We're trying to get rid of our last physical servers, right? A big component that was totally unknown to us 2 years ago was Citrix provisioning.
Right.
So if you guys have platinum level licensing and you have that available and you're not utilizing it, find me this afternoon and we'll talk about it, because I think it's a great product. It solved a lot of our problems. It's allowed us to maintain a stable environment and make changes rapidly across our servers, because now we're at probably 200 servers as far as Citrix servers, and only having 3 guys to make changes, right? We wouldn't
That's
be able to do
amazing.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked a little beforehand, and I was amazed that you were able to maintain the same, maybe what you spent extra on hardware and capital up front, was a surprise, but long-term operational costs, that's really what kills budgets, right?
Yep.
And the fact you were able to maintain. And I asked you why'd you think, and you right away, you're like, provisioning server probably is the number one key thing that allows us to standardize and move fast.
Yep.
And I knew that was a good tool. We've had great experience with it, but I was surprised that you had connected the dots between, the operational efficiency and that tool. So
Yep.
What else were the highlights, if any, that?
Yeah, I mean, when we started down that journey, we had very specific IT challenges that we were trying to solve, right? But as virtual desktop rolled out, the business began to see some advantages and some things that it could leverage that we kind of knew about, but that wasn't really our purpose, right? So like business continuity, right? All of a sudden, I started getting asked to be part of business continuity planning and how we could use virtual desktop so that we could assure that if we lost an office due to a natural disaster, right, that we could have people work from home.
Or a NATO convention, or a
NATO
snowstorm,
convention,
or a Democratic
exactly.
convention, right?
And so that was a major kind of win for our business. We've started to see our business operation units hire outside of their regions because now they can deliver all of their application sets to people no matter where they are. So it's been a win for those business units because now they can acquire human resources and talent outside of their geographic area. Right. We've started to see a shift in workload. MED3000 was it's been acquired. It's acquired many companies, so everybody kind of had their own set of applications and their own way of working. But now that we can virtualize those workflows, we've seen people shift. Right, some offices take load from other offices.
And it's been organic. It's not this forced thing.
Exactly.
Yep.
It's been organic, and it's allowed us to shift work to different offices as maybe some contracts finish and other offices get additional work. Right, instead of them hiring a bunch of people in the other office, letting a lot of people go. Right, they've been able to shift that work. Because of the flexibility that we've brought with virtual desktop.
Yeah, and it seemed like common sense 5 years ago, but until it happened, I think we all didn't realize the portability of people that, resources and management that virtualization brings.
And then probably the piece, of course, being medical, in the medical market, healthcare market, we have a lot of compliance that we've got to meet. And I was just telling Jeff, this year we had internal auditors come through our sites. We do every year. But one of the things that they highlighted, they said, hey, this virtual desktop thing that you're doing, because we've moved to purchasing WISE terminals, right? That solves a lot of problems, and that's good. You guys should keep doing that, right? So our compliance department is happy.
Auditors never say good
No,
things.
right.
Their job is to tell you what you're doing wrong.
Right. They said you need to get rid of more of the PCs and put in more of these WISE terminals because that's preventing your data leakage. You can secure the environment that way. So we've seen some positive things in that way too.
Okay, so final thoughts here. After the surprise in budgets and the achievements that you guys had, and then really capturing a whole bunch of new things you didn't even think about or weren't sure about selling. If you had to bundle all this up and give an accurate picture of what this would have been to begin with, do you think they would have bought off on it? Is it a good thing that nobody knew what this is really going to cost, or and are they happy with it now?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're happy with it now. I mean, it's become part of our strategy. Right.
And you've been promoted a couple times, so that
so
that couldn't have happened
clearly
without.
Yeah. Right. So overall, it was good. It cost us more. It took us longer than we thought it was going to be.
But there was still tremendous ROI and efficiency gain in the business.
Absolutely.
Right?
And every user that we bring up on it, we're realizing additional savings.
Yeah.
Right. And every day that we're on it, we're realizing that cost advantage.
Okay.
Right.
Great.
So.
Well, Nick, thanks a lot for your time. I appreciate you coming up and going through this. And
thanks.